Welcome to the English with Kirsty podcast from www.englishwithkirsty.com. Here I'll be sharing with you tips, information and other learning resources so that you can improve your business English. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the English with Kirsty podcast. And today I'm here to talk about presenting yourself and your business and your services in an additional language, but not from the point of view of what I do, because that is my job, but from when I had to do it the other day. So I've talked about this on LinkedIn, but I know that there are a lot of people who listen to the podcast who don't follow me on LinkedIn. So this is for the people that don't know this story already. So I speak 3 additional languages to varying degrees, German, then Romanian, then Portuguese, which is the newest. And I attend a regular class in Portuguese because I want to improve. And my biggest challenge is speaking. And I think that's why I also work with people who say that speaking is one of their biggest challenges, because I know this challenge. With German, it's not so much of a problem. And then Romanian is somewhere in the middle, and then Portuguese is the hardest because it's the newest, and I don't have the same level of fluency in Portuguese as I do with German. So I'm following a program. I'm having one-to-one language lessons, but we try to make them relevant to me and to what I'm doing. And because of that, we sometimes talk about business topics because it's important for me to be able to talk about those topics in my additional languages. So the other day I had the task that I had to present all of my services in Portuguese and explain who they're for, what they're about, how they help people. And I didn't know about this. So this was a surprise. I thought, okay, well, I know what my services are. I'll try. And some of them went better than others. Something like the customized learning programs, the program for translators. That was a bit easier. And then I got to the language mentoring, and that was hard because if you find it difficult to explain something in your first language, it's going to be amplified in another one. And I hadn't prepared, and I hadn't thought of a quick and easy way to do it. I'd written the content for my web copy, but yeah, suddenly being put on the spot to explain why that's different to some of the other programs was harder for me, and I realized that I had some work to do there. But then the task that I was given for after the session was to do something that I do with my clients as well. So to make 2 recordings. One of them was in English, talking about 3 of the services, and then to do the same thing in Portuguese. So like we could have something that we could compare this with as well. So it's not just the content and how good or clear it was, it's also how different is that from how I would do the same task in English. Because sometimes we can approach this kind of task because with the idea that we want to be perfect and we don't want to make any mistakes. But life isn't really about not making any mistakes. It's about being us. And so I did make mistakes, but even if I'd managed to get it like grammatically perfect, I could still have missed the point if it didn't really sound like Kirsty and it didn't have all the detail or all the personality that I would have when I speak in English. And of course it's going to be easier in your first language, that's obvious. But the idea is to try and bring these 2 versions of ourselves a bit closer together and to be more of ourselves in the other language. So I promised myself I wasn't going to sit there all Saturday making like 20 versions of this thing. I had other stuff to do and I had to be real. So I think I started again maybe 2 or 3 times, but I didn't make multiple versions of this thing. I just got it done. And so I decided to do it on the Saturday morning, so I wasn't thinking about it for the rest of the weekend. I just made my files and sent them off because I didn't want to think about them anymore. And then I waited until Monday when I got my feedback. And of course, there is always more work that we can do. I'm not at a level yet where I'm using the language in my business. I'm not confident enough to do that, and I don't think it would be helpful to do that yet because I still have some work to do. So the people that I'm working with have a much higher level than I do. But I think my learning points are still relevant because we can do the same things to a lesser extent, even when our language skills are at a higher level. So I waited for my feedback, and the feedback I got was obviously that there was more detail in the English versions. That was just to have something to compare to. And I did a better job with the language mentoring because I had time to think about how I could explain clearly the difference between the mentoring and the teaching. So that was an improvement because I had a bit of time to prepare myself and to consider what I wanted to say. But the main feedback that I didn't expect was about the content itself, in that when I lost confidence, I became very detail focused. Like, exactly how long does this last? Who is this for? Like, it was very, yes, in a way, it was simpler language, but it was also the language that's easier to, it's safer. It feels safe to talk about facts. And those facts can be useful when somebody is considering buying a service or a program. They want to know the facts, but that comes later. That's not really part of the introduction, because when you're explaining what something is, you really need to show like why should we care about this? What is different about it? What is the purpose of this? What is the value that it brings? And so rather than doing that, I was focusing on what felt safe. And for me in this instance, it was the facts about like features of the services, rather than why they're useful to someone, how they can help someone. And in the English version, I didn't do that because I wasn't feeling restricted by vocabulary or um, sentence structure, or I was just a lot more relaxed, and so it was easy to do what I would more naturally do. And all of these are learned skills, and we can always improve our skills in our native language too. It's not about that, but I think it was interesting for me because it showed that when we feel a bit under pressure or a bit nervous, we go for what's safe, usually, or we shut down completely. I've done that as well, but usually, if we keep going, we go for something that feels safe. But that isn't always the right way, because people could read that information from the website. They could find that somewhere else, or as I said, that's something that comes a bit later in the journey. If somebody is interested, they want to know more of the details. But what they're really interested in is how this service can help them, like the benefits and the transformation that this particular program is offering. I did it mainly with the mentoring program, but also with the other ones. So I think for me, as someone who does use my other languages, for example, in German, then I started thinking, well, maybe I do that in German a bit as well, to a lesser extent, because I feel more confident with German than I do with Portuguese. But for me, it was like a reminder to think about, how do we sometimes play it safe with additional languages because we don't want to be vulnerable, and because we don't want to have the conversations that are maybe a bit more difficult, not because they're difficult, but because you're trying to explain more complicated concepts. But sometimes those are the things that set us apart from providers or service providers in our niche who are offering something very similar. So there are lots of people with 11-week programs, but what actually happens in them is different. So for me, it reminded me that, of course, I know, but it's when we're speaking with people, it's the connection that we want. And I think sometimes we can focus a lot more on the perfection. Is this sentence right? Is this beautifully constructed? But really, it's about connection. And the way that you get that connection is by being yourself. And it could be being a bit vulnerable in terms of the language. It could be um, explaining what makes you different. It could be a lot of things, but I think our natural instinct is to try and play it safe, but that isn't setting us up in the best way to really make connections with people and to build genuine relationships. So that was a reminder for me, because I have work to do in all of my languages. I'm not here as an English trainer without this background experience of trying to put all these things into practice myself. And I wanted to share that because maybe it's a question for you, like when you are using all of your or any of your additional languages, how do you play it safe? Or do you? Maybe you don't. Maybe you're completely confident and there are never any situations in which you do that. But are there any ways? And it can be different for different people. It doesn't have to be like mine. But is there anything that you're doing to protect yourself that's actually preventing other people preventing other people from getting to know the real you and what you offer? So that's just a thought for you, a question for you. And next time I'll be back, I'm planning a group episode for episode 300 of the podcast, which is very cool. I'm looking forward to recording it, and it's great to have got to this milestone with 300 episodes. So I will be back soon with that. And in the meantime, have a great week and have fun with your languages.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the English with Kirsty podcast. If you have any questions or comments, my email address is kirsty@englishwithkirsty.com, or you can go to www.englishwithkirsty.com/podcast, where you'll find information about the individual episodes.